Hi everyone, and welcome back to another episode of 3D Universe Untethered. I'm Jeremy Simon with 3D Universe, and today we are going to be talking about the Ultimaker ecosystem. And I use that term ecosystem intentionally because what I'm hoping to share with you today, with the help of my friend Matt Griffin, who I'll introduce momentarily, is kind of giving you a better understanding of the overall value of the Ultimaker ecosystem. The fact that you're not just getting a 3D printer, that you're getting all of these other things that tie in with the 3D printer that we'll talk about today. And so we'll be talking about that. I do want to point out, any of you who have worked with 3D Universe for a while know that we are vendor agnostic. We always try to sort of talk with our customers and understand what it is that they're trying to do and help guide them to whatever the most appropriate solution for them may be. Honestly, whether or not it's something we offer, we have many times pointed somebody somewhere else just because that seems to be the best fit for them, and it doesn't happen to be something we offer. So we do offer other brands, we offer other solutions, but I gotta say, myself personally, I do find a lot of value in the Ultimaker platform, in how I have been able to use it over the years, and the things that we're going to be talking about today have certainly added value to my business, and so that's some of what I hope to share with you today, so that you understand sort of what you're getting when you get an Ultimaker 3D printing solution, other than just the printer itself. As always, we're live streaming these, so this is on Facebook Live, and if you're watching with us live, please use the comments there to join us in this discussion. You can post questions, you can post comments. We'll see those in pretty much real time, and we can kind of bring you into the discussion here as we go. We might cover that at the end or as we go through, depending on timing, but we will try to get to your questions before we wrap up. So with that, I'm going to bring Matt on screen here and embarrass him for a moment to tell you a little bit about who Matt is. So Matt is the host and producer, first of all, of Talking Additive, a podcast series, which I'm going to ask him to share a little bit more with us about. He's also the producer of the global webinar series for Ultimaker, where he's the director of community development. He's a co-founder of Construct 3D as well. And for those of you not familiar with that, Construct 3D is a vendor-agnostic 3D printing, digital fabrication conference and expo focused on academic use, best practices, and professional development opportunities for faculty, staff, and students, from anything from informal to K through 12 and higher education contexts, the whole spectrum of education. It's a great event. We've taken part in it, and it was a lot of fun. So, Matt, welcome. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks so much for having me on here. I'm really excited to come join. I've been
great.
catching a bunch of these over the course of the year, and have enjoyed it.
Yeah, likewise. So I want to talk a little bit about your series first. So you're on a podcast series called Talking Additive, and maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that, because you've had some great content on there, very, very similar to some of the things that we've done. But tell us a bit more about that podcast series and where people can learn more about that. I'll actually pull it up on screen as you're describing that.
Oh, perfect. So you can go to talkingadditive.com. So this is a show. I mean, speaking of Jeremy's message to sort of start things off, that he is vendor agnostic and really wants to make sure customers have the right solutions. Well, I mean, that's kind of on brand for Ultimaker as well. I mean, we know we're not the only solution. We want to be sort of best citizens and really, kind of win your love that way. So one of the ways that we do that is we put a lot of our time and energy into sharing knowledge and making sure that everybody out there can benefit from this technology that we really see as transformative, and really, one that initially, I think all of us, Jeremy can remember the early days where we thought this was all about replacing manufacturing. Well, that story might have changed a bit for all of professional desktop 3D printing. We're now seeing how it's actually fully changing design and manufacturing, education. And so we run this show that is not really about talking about Ultimaker all the time. It's our show to talk to our customers, allies, material partners, folks around the world that we think are really inspiring, and share that knowledge with all the listeners. It's really kind of a business of 3D printing show, where we often talk with manufacturers or, say, material developers, people who are offering custom tech that really kind of changes things, and looking at how this can really help our listeners with companies change, bring in additive, change their companies in positive ways, really draw value from this technology.
Yeah, it's great. And like I said, it's very similar to kind of what we do here. I see it as maybe you guys tend to focus a little bit more on the larger scale and what industry is doing, and we tend to focus a little bit more on kind of smaller business and startups. It just happens to be what really inspires me when I see somebody that has some idea or something they're passionate about, and they can get a 3D printer or a laser cutter or whatever it is and start a business, and get out of a job they hate. I just love those stories. I think that's so exciting.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, it's been amazing. I mean, Jeremy, you and I have both been in desktop 3D printing, and related technologies for, I mean, at least 10 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we've seen this technology that, it initially sort of miniaturized and made accessible some existing tech that was really expensive and really wasn't put to the kind of uses that get us excited. But we've watched it actually really change things for people. And so I mean, it's kind of it really is a powerful force, in particular in areas such as allowing engineers and designers to solve problems, communicate what they're wanting to do, and be able to achieve what they'd like to right there, on site, in ways that in the past would have involved lots of outside vendors and turnaround time and expensive service bureaus. So it's really there are a lot of stories there. I mean, that's why I don't see Talking Additive slowing down. We have a lot of things on there, but I've actually been focusing on some of our enterprise and manufacturing customers who we really can learn from.
Right.
In seeing what they're doing and seeing how their thinking has changed. For example, so we've been running just since April of last year. And we're on our 25th episode on Tuesday, so you have to check it out on Tuesday. It's actually a pretty special one. I'm probably not supposed to say what it is, but I don't care because I think we're starting to tease it anyway. We're starting to celebrate the 10th year anniversary of Ultimaker, which is kind of an interesting one, and we're doing it in an Ultimaker kind of way. So we're kind of thinking of it not just like about ourselves, but in terms of it's actually kind of a parallel to the kind of the growing up of desktop 3D printing across the industry. Nice. We've kind of been there for that whole journey, so we're kind of focusing on it that way. So that episode on Tuesday will feature some early stories and some kind of growth moments that I think will be kind of exciting for people. But we've had folks on there over the 25 episodes, such as like Job from Eric's. I thought that interview was really insightful. I mean, actually, the full interview was like 3.5 hours. We kind of kept going for a long time. We trimmed it down for what we broadcast. But he's kind of a deep thinker about 3D printing and its potential context for manufacturing. And the reason I bring that one up is that it represents a company that that often does things like help facilitate complex parts with advanced needs for, like, say, after you're done with a whole manufacturing run of something. Let me be sort of more specific. Like, you have a machine in deployment and you've had it for a long time and you can't get the supplies for one of the gaskets or one of the elements, and you need exactly the right thing. I mean, that might be for like a medical manufacturing line or food and bev or whatever that particular application is. You need the right thing, and so they help to facilitate making those parts. But here's where it gets really interesting, and where it's sort of proven to me that 3D printing has had its secret 3D revolution happening the whole time, is that they're not they're really pushing some of their top customers at the front end of when they're designing equipment, solutions, etc., to think about can you make this part so it's easy to 3D print? And they do that because when you're prototyping and your needs are quantity needs are low, you can immediately tackled making them because of all the functional materials out there that can really match exactly what you need. But also because they're proposing that the longer view on the life cycle of these parts is that someday you'll be done. You'll have no interest in doing another like 100,000 injection molding runs of something, but you'll still have that solution out there in the field. You still might need some more, spare parts, even regular runs of parts that are wear and tear. So if you make it so you can fabricate it another way in its its twilight years, then you've saved a lot of time and money, and have sort of thought it through. So you make some changes to how you would design it that impact the like injection molding or the large scale mass manufacturing run, but put you in a good place to be able to satisfy that part, well beyond the end of life that you have in your mind, because
Right.
patterns change, and if nothing is more clear to everybody over the last year and a half, in addition to so much, you guys have covered a lot of really interesting aspects of COVID and empowerment from 3D printing. But if you can remember that the supply chain stuff, the way it broke down, that's really kind of underscored how fragile
That's right.
the whole supply chain ecosystem
And
is
fluid.
now.
It's this
Yeah.
constantly changing environment, as business owners already know, but this kind of reminds us an experience like we've had, right? And I keep hearing the same kind of stories. Just recently we featured one of our customers, Jason Enders from RE Suspension, on our program, and I love to hear, because it's the same story. We used to outsource these parts when we wanted to prototype something, and it would take several weeks to get one back, and it would cost $700, $800, $900, $1,000, something like that. Now we can turn it around inside of the same day, and it costs a few bucks. And that time piece, don't underestimate that, because yes, it saves you a huge amount of money, but there's a certain momentum to the innovation cycle, and you get ideas going, and the fact that you could design it and 3D print it and iterate in the same day, that is powerful stuff right there. And we were talking about that. So yeah, there's no doubt there's a lot of value in 3D printing, and I think a lot of more and more people are realizing that it's more of a given that yes, there's value in 3D printing. But we get as a reseller, we're constantly getting the obvious question: which 3D printer should I get? So that kind of brings us back to the question of value. And so I mentioned in the intro that I wanted to talk about the whole ecosystem of Ultimaker. And so let me kind of clarify to get us going on this what I think of when I think of that ecosystem. Obviously, the printers themselves, and I've always loved the Ultimaker printers because of their consistency and reliability. I've always told customers, if you don't want to have to spend your time managing the printer and tinkering and troubleshooting, and you just want to be able to focus on your job, your design, and let the printer do what it should do, that's where something like an Ultimaker shines. And so the printer hardware is great, but then you get the materials. So if you're it's an open material platform, you can use any material out there that's 285, which is just a mind-bogglingly growing list. I mean, there's so much to choose from out there, including some of the exciting actual metal materials we've been looking at lately, the BASF that you can actually send out and have sintered and get a real solid steel part from your Ultimaker. There's just such exciting stuff happening. Plus, when you're using Ultimaker branded materials, it's auto-detected by the printers, unsupported models. It's automatically read in by Cura. You get all your settings loaded. It just makes this wonderful, smooth, easy workflow. And then I mentioned Cura, so you get this best-in-class software for slicing free of charge. And I've been so amazed at how frequently that's been updated, how far it has come, and how I love it. It's there's so many options out there, but the numbers kind of speak for themselves. I think at this point, Kira kind of owns the market of slicing. And with the marketplace in there now and being able to get all these easy access, material profiles and plugins. And then we're going to talk about Ultimaker Essentials, which you now get free with an Ultimaker printer, and this gives you access to different levels of support. It's special software that's enterprise grade and other things that we'll explain. We'll talk about the Ultimaker Academy, where you now now have an online e-learning, platform with onboarding courses that you can take to help your team get up to speed on the 3D printers. So when you look at all of that together, the hardware, the software, the materials, and how they all talk to one another, and the support and the services and everything that goes along to support that, it's just, to me, it's all that together that creates this really powerful scenario that has a lot of value that kind of goes beyond just getting a machine, So that was kind of what I wanted to kind of talk about as far as the ecosystem. And maybe a good way to start in on that, Matt, is, Ultimaker recently did this, what they called a Transformation Summit, pretty big event, multiple days, where you covered a lot of the things that I just kind of outlined in a lot of detail. So maybe summarize for us some of the things that were announced there and the things that you talked about, and we can kind of take the discussion from there, because I know we're going to get into all those topics then.
Yep, perfect. So the Ultimaker Transformation Summit was a virtual conference because, as it happens, some of you might have noticed that it's hard to do physical events right now. So we wanted to explore that, but we wanted to kind of take it a little bit further. It was a first virtual conference for us. Like, we've done, webinars and all kinds of stuff online for years, like any of our peers have done. But we wanted to see what it was like to do this. And we paired it with a kind of special moment. At the beginning of this year, we acquired a new CEO, Jürgen von Hollen, who is really impressive CEO who's coming to us from Universal Robotics. And he's bringing some ideas that, speaking of ecosystem, that really are pointing to some exciting directions for Ultimaker to be taking over the next several years, and where we really are focusing on this kind of ecosystem view. Ultimaker as a platform, and what may help viewers and listeners understand to see where it might be interesting. Hearing this from Jürgen von Hollen, and you can hear my episode 21, interviewing him at length about this. If you haven't studied cobots, or you don't really know that whole story, it's a pretty interesting one. And Universal Robotics really what kind of defined that market segment, and there were some interesting characteristics of how that kind of technology made possible local fulfillment and solve technical challenges in places where it was kind of difficult to get that kind of infrastructure, places that aren't like right down the street from a lot of robot vendors. And then it really actually starts echoing off of what Jeremy was saying earlier about some of the people on these shows, that it's the small and medium-sized businesses that often have some pretty critical business realities to how they need to solve things and where they need to bring in capabilities, and they can by kind of eliminating some of the out-of-house expenses and being capable themselves of fulfilling certain elements, they can really tighten up a lot of stuff in costs and time and that kind of thing, and start to grow. So you have him coming from this kind of background and seeing not only that Ultimaker has now been sort of adopted by manufacturing companies, leaders around the world in kind of enterprise, top 1,000 businesses, but also that we are becoming a trusted tool that really can meet the needs of some of these companies that they're really only looking to get a couple S5s or a Pro bundle and really solve something. It might be very specific what they need to do, and it might be jigs and fixtures. It might be indirect materials that are not their product, but help them really do their product in the way they would like to do, and and kind of eliminate some supply chain issues. And so he arrived raring to go to share this story, and the Ultimaker Transformation Summit was his opportunity to kind of share his full vision of Ultimaker as a platform, a real strong focus on ecosystem, which extends beyond. How you define ecosystem, Jeremy, is totally correct. I would just bundle in that actually, Ultimaker and even our sales partners like you who are selling other vendors, even together we're not enough. We need to start bundling in, which we've been doing, other companies, like the material companies in the Material Alliance, top chemical companies in the world, are helping to make profiles and really raising the kind of water level for profiles. In the past, I mean, all the OEMs made their own profiles. And what did we know? I mean, we thought we knew a lot, but we learned a lot once we really involved the material companies in understanding how these polymers relax and what the various counterintuitive tweaks are. So you have material partners, you have software partners, companies like Teton Simulation that make Smart Slice for Cura. I don't know if you've had them on this show yet, but they're pretty interesting.
We have them, actually. Funny you mention it. They are scheduled for an upcoming episode, but I will mention that, yes, we are a partner of theirs, and our customers will find it on shop3duniverse.com. Very cool software. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah. So that's something where, it ends up being a Transformation Summit story. So I'll tell that briefly. So to sum up the our new CEO story, is that he wanted to come and sort of share this vision and bring our new CTO and Paul, who's the lead of our software strategy, together to really lay out the bold ambition of where we're going with Ultimaker, and get people excited. And so it was this virtual conference. We had sessions like that opening session I just described, but we also had a very large kind of virtual showroom kind of environment that had customer stories of all kinds of varieties, some of which were included thanks to partners like 3D Universe. Material companies sharing what's latest details about their offerings and how they really kind of add capability, like BASF's metal FFF solutions and their continuing leadership in that space. We also had a conference. Now I'm very attached to the conference because I didn't just host it, but Hana Takini, who's my producing partner at Ultimaker, on both Talking Additive and the global webinar series, we made the conference together. We programmed it and booked everything, and got some really inspiring folks from across Ultimaker and some of the software and material partners to come in and share. We were pretty excited about what they shared. We were proud to have booked, we think, the right people, but they really shone. And it's actually still up. You can kind of go and see a lot of this, but I can summarize a couple of elements. But I wanted to mention that the Teton Sim story, especially because you'll get a chance to see them here pretty soon. So I interviewed Doug Kinnick on episode 22, so quite recently, on Talking Additive. Actually, one of my favorite interviews so far. I mean, Doug really knows his stuff. He
does.
Not only does he described himself as like classically trained, in like continuous fiber. Well, I guess what is the right term, but like FEA analysis, elements of how things break down, what the limits are when things begin to deform beyond, return. So he has this like deep technical knowledge, but he also was product manager on when he was at Autodesk on generative design, which really kind of took something that was a really exciting piece of software, like a core software utility, and turned it into a product. So he has that kind of background and thinking, the technical and the kind of entrepreneurial side. And so he was talking about how when he banded back together with some of the folks that he had been working with on continuous fiber stuff before they went to Autodesk, and they did, they launched Teton Simulation. They didn't have to knock on Ultimaker's door and say, can we have permission to develop something for Cura? Because we have APIs. I mean, they did come and say hello, and we were really happy about what they were doing. They got a lot of encouragement,
Good.
but nothing stopped them from jumping in and
That's right.
finding some things that they could do, and finding an opportunity for really extending, capabilities for the
Yeah.
right, kinds of folks.
And since we're talking about this, I'll just mention quickly for anyone listening who might not be familiar with this, the software that we're talking about, Smart Slice, and there is a free trial available. It's a plugin for Cura, essentially, so that when you're prototyping and you have a part that needs to hold up under certain conditions, and otherwise it's going to break, and you need to, typically the approach is you try something, right? You print it with certain settings and a certain amount of infill, and you put it in and see if it breaks, right? And then you go back and try increasing the infill and thickening the walls and try again. Well, there's a lot of attempts before you finally get it right, and you often end up with wasted material because settings are never perfect. So this Smart Slice software allows you to take your model, tell it where the forces are being applied, where is a fixed point, where is force being applied, how much force. It'll analyze that for you and automatically generate custom settings so that different regions of the print have different settings. You might have more infill in a certain area and less in another area, and it does all this for you, and then all you have to do is slice and print. It's pretty amazing.
I mean, I'm kind of obsessed with it, especially because of the one tricky thing with a lot of the generative tools, as far as like generating um, topology that can do functional things, is that you still, maybe you have that topology, you're ready to go. You still have to slice it. You still have to fabricate it, and whether it's on a CNC or a 3D printer. There can be real challenges to kind of matching those original goals. So having a tool like Teton, Smart Slice or Cura, that is thinking in terms of manufacturing methods and the materials, and is really kind of optimizing things and helping you really zero in and be pretty confident in the slicing. It's
Well,
really nice.
that was something we talked about just to wrap this topic up, because that can, like I said before, there are so many materials on the market, and that in itself can get expensive if you're trying half a dozen different materials to figure out the right one for your application. Well, Smart Slice, they've built in profiles for a whole bunch of different materials, so you can literally test to see how that material will hold up for your part before you ever buy a spool of it. I mean, it's just pretty slick stuff. So anyway, but you have this, so you, yeah. So the point being, you have this great open platform. You got the open source hardware, you got open source software with an API. I mean, so getting back to just kind of this, the value of this system. So some of the other things maybe that were announced at the summit.
Yeah. So in the conference, well, I guess I'll fold it into the two things, because there were a couple of announcements that were in the kickoff day, in the presentation with our new CEO, but we also reinforced them in the conference. So over the course of the day, one of the main things was really sharing the kind of the new software centricity of Ultimaker. I mean, we have we've had top software that people have been using, Cura, that has plays a major role in a lot of tool chains, including those not involving 3D printers of ours. But we really wanted to underscore a bunch of opportunities for current software like Digital Factory, Essentials, and some of these new subscription packages that we announced, that you can actually unlock a lot more. And so we have we're reinforcing that we do have this hardy plugin ecosystem, and showed over the course of the conference that a couple of software partners like Caster is quite interesting product that it helps you to use machine learning to analyze even massive bombs of materials, parts in like, say, a huge manufacturing process for a product, and identify which ones could be 3D printable and in which technologies. Now, before you think, oh, that sounds like an application engineer, well, it is sort of like having an application engineer if you didn't have one. But application engineers like ours actually also like this, because a lot of the really great candidates, and this is sort of true across the whole transformation of professional desktop 3D printing. Some of these parts, they're not so fancy. You don't have to focus the way, kind of the early history of 3D printing and additive manufacturing has been on only, extremely high value, complex parts for aerospace that cost you $100,000 to make, and save you $50,000. Like, great, but like, I mean, certain contexts need that, but not all of them. But when you can realize that some of these parts are a perfect match, not just as a oh, it's possible to 3D print them, but actually it's the right business model to print them. It's going to be cheaper than any other way to produce them, especially at the quantities you need, at the time, turnaround time to have them. And so that's a really interesting package that's kind of unlocking a lot of capabilities for folks, in particular that maybe they're just adding additive manufacturing capability, and while they have operational facility in producing parts, they don't yet have those years of trying things and know what I could point to that one. That's the one to do. So they've integrated with our digital library aspect of Digital Factory, which you get with our subscription models, such as Essentials and Professionals and Excellence, and why this is a little more interesting than it might first sound. Like, there are many repos of parts that you can use. It's really interesting when you think about a team, creating parts, identifying parts, and then validating them. Not only to get the right design, so you have a kind of stable thing to look at, and you can put a lot of information there, including like the business value of actually doing that project. You can, they break that down in digital library, so you can really kind of study that. And then when you have success, surface it internally and say, you know what, we try this experiment. Look, this is the right way to do this part. And we're going to expect to save, $1,000 this year on this part alone. This is now a process for us. But also, you can get your slice files in there and use Digital Factory to prepare things to put a 3D printer at any endpoint you want. I mean, it's not new to guests of this show, the value of multiple participants in a design having 3D printers so they can validate parts and designs and collaborate and contribute. But also remembering that you can, maybe you want to have a fabrication node that's on a factory floor, or in or with a close collaborator who wants to be hands off. They don't really want to do that work of they're not obsessed with 3D printers like Jeremy and me, and like just get joy from trying to really dial them in. They just want to hit print, like have their part. Like, they don't care. Right. They want to have that part. So this kind of thing is really sort of changing workflows. So you've got Teton Sim on the design front. You have Caster for identifying parts and kind of adding that understanding of the return on investment and business value of parts to help get you beyond your assumptions, which I'm sure all of us have, including me. I'm still excited about things that are cool to print, but are probably not the right match. But we also included Autodesk. I mean, Fusion 360, they did a integration, so you can send parts, right to digital library really fluently. And in fact, the team at Ultimaker, who were doing a hackathon in December, just to try some of the API stuff and push it and give a good example, in just a couple of days, they spun up an Onshape integration that works perfectly. Just as a couple, like three folks working together to make.
So I'm going to jump in here because this is something I'd like to understand more. And maybe this is a good opportunity to use as an example. And a lot of our watchers know that I work a lot with this Enable volunteer community, and I'm actually involved in a collaborative design team project right now, where about a dozen of us are working to come up with a new and improved prosthetic hand model, and we're working collaboratively in Fusion 360. So this sounds like it could be really cool. Multiple people on our team have Ultimaker printers. So walk me through this. How might this work? How would that tie in with the digital library that you're describing, and how could that be used in a project like this?
Well, I mean, in this case, it's taking advantage of our cloud API details, and then you have, Fusion has the A360,
Yes.
their ecosystem for storing files. And so where it might be exciting is, say you're collaborating in the design, you're using all the collaboration tools in Fusion 360 to even kind of spin the tool around and get it really tuned and get in annotations and comments and get things tested. Well, as you get closer to done, and particularly you want to do some further validation stages, then at a certain point you want to leave design and get things validated and start deploying it. And so that might be kind of the right case, because you can get a part out to the digital library, date and time stamped for when it was kicked out of the Fusion 360 system, and print it and have it validated and have that code validated. There now for depending on your use and how you're working with medical professionals to bring something like that to a patient. There's regulatory stuff you should follow, and there's some interesting tools and guidance in the land of orthotics and medical devices around that. But you can at least integrate your process with whatever compliance route you're doing, and say and freeze in place. This is how we're producing this part with this material with this hardware, and the code is ready to go, and you have pretty considerable confidence that you're going to get that part again. So it means that you can speed up the process of evaluating, and you can also recreate it more easily than trying to remember like version 6 or version 7. So that it starts to speed up collaboration that way.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, and this is, forgive me, but this is actually one of these aspects that I'm less familiar with, because you guys you're doing a lot of development. There's a lot of new things being added to the platform. So if I'm understanding it correctly, as opposed to just kind of creating your model and sticking an STL file somewhere, we could use this platform to sort of store the models along with, for example, material suggestions. Yeah. For example, on our team, we've decided we want to design for Pet G. That's kind of the optimal material for our application, and that's going to feed into our design thinking. How thick does this or that part need to be, et cetera, given the strength of Pet G? So we could actually specify that by using digital library to convey those instructions. Interesting.
You can actually share more information there with that project. You can save, you can get other files in there. You can get some written instructions, and you can have those material pairings, and nice. even profiles if you have custom profiles. Well, I need to double check that. I think you can call profiles, but you might need to keep passing them around in the 3MF file. I'm not sure. Okay. But so it becomes a matter of having that shared space that the collaborators can point to and say, this is what we're working on. Which, I mean, this is a world in which I don't know about you, but I can't imagine the idea of working on a document that's not a shared document with a team anymore.
Right.
I mean, that ship has sailed, and it still was a little bit tricky doing this with 3D printed parts. Even there are ways to be. There are best practices to follow, and we've all kind of evolved some, but this is really tied into getting as much information and value about how to produce that part as possible. And it's really starting to change things. And here's an example from another customer that kind of underlies why you would do this. Azoth that works with a bunch of top enterprise manufacturers. They have a plan they call Tomo, take one, make one, that is set up to validate digital inventory. So these are parts that have been validated as files thoroughly for mechanical purposes. So it's a little easier to use a whole system for this. Our system is not set up for medical compliance. so they they bring their expertise in 3D printing and helping their customers prepare these parts, and then those customers can fulfill those parts as needed in a way that they can basically, the second they use one, they have a spare and it triggers the production of a new spare replacement. And so if you can think about the cost of inventory, a lot of places, I mean, I think they work with a lot of tier ones where there's some mandatory readiness requirements that you could lose your contract if you don't meet. So people will have entire systems sitting there, like entire electronics line that could make electronics to the ground up, sitting there under dust wrap because they just have to, they cannot be limited by suppliers, or they can't fulfill that role to their upstream customer. And so this allows them to be very mindful of which parts they can have ready to run at faster than they can have it produced off out of sight. And that really speaks to a future in which maybe the production of parts, the uses of materials and resources in general are much more, kind of closer to kind of that just-in-time model, but maybe with less of the recent supply chain difficulties in doing complete just-in-time stuff, where you really are being very intentional about where and when you print a part, or you produce a part, so that you can really be incredibly flexible about what you need and not put all of your capital investment in rooms full of parts that even kind of spoil.
Yeah.
And I mean, part of this is also the functional materials are a huge part of this, and industry from product product designers and an engineering firm all the way up to enterprise manufacturing, recognizing that there are a lot of parts that just by tradition are over-engineered and produced in metals that just really shouldn't be. Like it's not actually worth all the milling and loss of material to produce them for them to do their job. And so a really targeted polymer solution is actually a much more sustainable solution in the long run. So we're starting to see that pushing through, and I can only imagine that conversation will grow over time.
I certainly hope so. We need it.
Yeah.
So
let me just zip through, because I got really excited about the software elements, which is not surprising. Yeah. That was the main message of the conference, but of the summit in general. But the conference also included a couple other things. Like we had Bart Van As come on to talk about Ultimaker's material line, and which was a really handy video if you get a chance to see it, because it really shows you how these how these selections were made, and how we work with engineering partners to help them to really guide how profiles are created. But he also got a chance to launch the news that came out earlier this week that we're now offering Ultimaker Pet G, and made a strong case for why it's really, especially for industrial contexts, gonna be the new baseline material a lot will use. And this the Pet G that we launched is very printable. It's very nice. There's a lot of Pet Gs out there, but it is quite nice. And I think
we do already have it available. Yep. So check out shop3duniverse.com. Get your Ultimaker Pet G. I'm looking forward to trying it out myself. I haven't gotten the order here yet, but it's it is exciting to me, because I so often talk about how it's almost a little bit frustrating sometimes the way so many people stick with just like PLA and they never explore further, when there's so many other more interesting options out there that you really don't need to be afraid of. Things are much easier to print these days with the current formulations than what maybe you experienced in years back. And Pet G is one of those materials. I mean, I fell in love with tough PLA a while ago, and that still is sort of my go-to material because it's so easy and so tough, and it just has everything I'm looking for. But If you need a little extra temperature resistance, that's where it falls short, and that's where I love Pet G. I mean, it gives you the same, you get that great strength and, the same kind of easy to work with, which is not common for all Pet G, but Ultimakers, and designed for printability. And just that temperature, it's not the highest temperatures. I think it's up to like 76C, right? For temperature resistance. So it's a good level of temperature resistance, not as high as something like maybe a polycarbonate or nylon carbon fiber, but it's pretty good. So yeah, I think it's a very exciting material.
And it really, with all of the value of this technology for manufacturing process aids, et cetera, it's exciting recognizing that in a lot of cases this will fully meet the engineering requirements of a lot of these parts, and really kind of open up niche elements as a solution, where it's not a step towards something. It's a pretty affordable way to just get it done.
Right.
And in general, I think that the messaging, I mean, those of us who are in 3D printing get almost sick of talking about jigs and fixtures, because for us this was solved years ago. But manufacturers are still kind of recognizing this is a great solution.
Yeah.
I think over time people are going to realize they really shouldn't be paying more than this for indirect parts. They can do this, be flexible, empower their staff that really knows how they're working with those the parts and processes to be flexible to change things, and focus their attention and their engineers and their costly parts on really the core business,
Right.
core elements. Yeah. Right. So now, we're kind of on a route for 3D printing to get really boring in a way that's going to really change things.
Yeah, that would be a good boring. Yeah. So
there's still plenty of interesting things.
I want to get into, if you don't mind, I want to get into a little bit of some of the changes that were announced. There were some changes that were talked about. Most importantly, that anytime anyone who buys an Ultimaker 3D printer now, one of the current models, you get Ultimaker Essentials free of charge, lifetime access. That's something that you used to have to pay for. Tell us about Essentials. What is Essentials? What are you getting with that?
Well, when we were talking about the ecosystem earlier, you had mentioned there's hardware, materials, software, and also the whole support ecosystem.
Right.
That's all part of it. But you can kind of go a little beyond that. We have Digital Factory, which is a cloud tool that allows you to manage your printers, but also kind of communicate about them, connect with teams around them, and Digital Library that allows you to kind of manage, deploy those parts, and essentially track what's really key. So when we launched this,
for those who are watching as opposed to listening, I'm just going to pull up the Digital Factory on screen here so they can kind of see what you're talking about here. This is you're just looking at our printers here.
Yeah, so you could dive in and see what's running on them. You can start jobs. You can look at the data of what's been produced and what materials. It's so this kind of core business data was often just kind of lost in the kind of lab experiences that really we've all kind of followed over the years, where you take a thumb drive, you run over to a printer, and you run something, and you get your part, and you're like, you almost don't care that the printer survives after that moment of you getting that part. Well, this is helping you to start to really draw more conclusions from what you're doing, what you're learning. You might identify a part keeps kicking through a lab and it never is produced right, and it's like, okay, stop thinking that you should just hit print each time. Take a look at this part. What's wrong with this? Why is this failing? Anyway, so these elements and the capabilities that we were offering, as a kind of before Essentials. With Essentials, we really stepped up the game and reached out to get outside help, in particular for security integration, because we had a lot of enterprise and university customers, likewise, who They have strict IT policies to even get things through the door, and honestly, we had allies in a lot of these places, and they would find ways to do this. But it was kind of advanced to kind of solve how they would do things, and it was a pain point for them in working with IT, to the point that some would like sneak around and essentially either like rip out Wi-Fi cards or that kind of thing just to get them through the door. So now instead we have we've worked to get a lot of help to make sure that we're compliant for a lot of security, for having a heightened security. And
there's actually a firewall built into the printers now, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a firewall built into the printers. There's Cura Enterprise, which many of us like to live on the bleeding edge and have new changes. But you can imagine if you're managing a big lab of users and you don't want to worry that someone less experienced can do something dangerous to kind of endanger the whole lab. I mean, that's
right.
That's a level of vigilance on your part that might burn you out pretty fast. So you can instead use one that's already validated for that use and can be installed over the over
the network,
over the network, etc. And so basically we launched that because we knew this was the next step to really making this useful for enterprise and university customers. And over the course of getting a lot of feedback and working really closely with a bunch of these customers, including about like 40 really closely, and taking meetings and even rolling out changes, we realized that there would be a different arrangement would be better. The Essentials really is essential for everyone, so we wanted to make that a part of any hardware purchase from now on, and we offered two new higher level service packages. Now, if you're one who isn't looking for enterprise software, you might not be the right candidate for these. But a lot of these customers, they were not only willing to kind of spend more to have a lot more access to things such as the top tier excellence actually comes with some API support. I mean, you could basically get some hours from our lead architects to help you integrate and solve problems. Like, that's very valuable. And so some of these enterprise customers are not only used to doing that kind of thing, they were kind of missing that option. They were offering to like steal our employees and trap them there to solve their problems. And so now we can help them without them taking our staff. And likewise, there are some additional resources such as CAD and interoperability, translation, etc., that are appearing for professionals, which is the next tier up. So you can go and check out these at ultimaker.com and really get to know if they're the right matches for you, and in fact do well, it's not a demo, but you can get a first month free to trial to really evaluate, make sure it is the right solution for you, and
so now
what we have in mind there.
So you talked about Digital Factory. We took a look at that. You talked about Digital Library and helping to centrally manage jobs and all that. Tell me about Academy, because this is also something that's very exciting to me, that when you get an Ultimaker printer, you now get access to Ultimaker Academy. Tell us about what that is.
Yeah. So we announced this, not too much little than a year ago, that we were offering the Academy, and that they were making this a central offering, ongoing. While the library is still building, there is really exciting stuff in there. We started with actually the IT integration elements for Essentials, which now any of you who buy hardware now can benefit from, because what it means is that if you're the champion for additive manufacturing in your company and you need to integrate into systems that exist, I mean, those folks might not be as excited about 3D printing as you, and you can get them up to speed and see how to integrate this, and the efforts that we've taken to try to really be as flexible and as good a match for standards ways of solving these things.
And
So
how to overcome those barriers.
Yes, you can make friends with your IT team instead of having them like sitting prepared to like shut you down and take your toys away because you might. No. So those elements are in there, which are a great resource because it was kind of, I mean, it was a steep learning curve to figure out how to solve that for this particular use.
Sure.
And instead now anybody, any company can add these services pretty easily. But there are other elements that are useful for absolutely everybody. Such as the onboarding videos.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
Yes, and so if you buy a product now, you can, as a part of, bringing it home and setting it up, you can get access to those onboarding videos. That now it's easier for you to get the whole set of them. And what is particularly helpful is these e-learning pieces. They're not only a great way to get the basics of how to use and the full capabilities of the platform that you have picked, but it's on us to make sure that it's keeping you up to date with shifts in firmware, in versions of Cura, in hardware revisions, and this is something universities in particular have been really excited to see because they're looking to take those elements and kind of flip the training. They would like to be able to have new users showing up to the lab that want to use 3D printing to go and complete these kinds of tasks and learn about how to use this equipment from us, with the all the pieces in place, instead of constantly remaking those videos internally. So now they can just kind of incorporate those elements and have that a part of their process, and can they can focus their attention on shop policy and how things are done in that facility and what the goals and values are there, which is a better use of time for for those teams and labs to do, because that's unique to that place. So we have other elements in there. There's some Cura elements that are in there. They're quite good and really, really helpful. But behind the scenes, the e-learning team has been doing some amazing stuff. And I'm not going to, freak them out by sharing the full roadmap, which would not be helpful to them and would just cause them to kill me. But they're the content is amazing and it's being drawn from all across the company, particular collaborations with the AEs and R&D. So this is really great content. And we've announced that we're going to, in the relatively near future, start to roll out the some of the kind of, like intermediate level resources that have been created internally. We'll let those come out naturally, but I think that our entire ecosystem will be strongly benefited.
Yeah, I tend to agree, and I that kind of takes us back to the original topic, right? Of talking about the overall value of looking at maybe an Ultimaker solution versus some of the alternatives that are out there. We've talked a lot about transformation today, and I think some of that is maybe referring to the transformation we're seeing in the 3D printing industry and how it's being used, but perhaps equally important, the transformation that can happen within organizations as they incorporate 3D printing and change the way they're doing things. But in order for that to really see its full potential, it has to be integrated. It has to be distributed through an organization. Everyone has to be able to have access to this technology. They have to have common workflows. The things that we talked about today, like the digital library and being able to specify not only here's the models, but here's how you print them and with what material and what settings, giving access to the common software platform and common machines and different materials. Just when you think about all of that used together in a collaborative environment, that's where I kind of start thinking there's some really unique value here that you don't get out of just getting getting a 3D printer and putting it on your desk, and that's what I was hoping we could kind of share with people today. So I'd like to hear your take on that, Matt. We're coming up on the end of our time today. It's amazing how fast these things go. But in the couple minutes remaining, give me what's your take on that? If you're looking at somebody who's considering a 3D printing solution for their organization, it's a big investment. Give us the pitch. What is the value of investing in the Ultimaker ecosystem in your mind?
Well, the kind of advice I usually give folks who are trying to choose equipment is to really figure out what they need and really understand what they need and what they can afford in terms of also the long-term investment. There are a lot of cases where people will kind of race to a decision. It won't surprise you that I'll mention that there are risks of buying really low-cost solutions because they might not meet your need, and they might require a pretty steep learning curve to really get them to sing and to maintain them. But if you look at the kind of experience offered by Ultimaker that Jeremy was talking about earlier, where it's really all the effort is going in to try to make this as seamless an experience as possible, so you can really focus on the parts that you're making, and getting stable workflows and producing them, or your prototyping pathways, so you're not like just always fussing in the back of your mind like, oh, should I, if I changed how I do the motion mechanicals on my printer, could I get a slightly different type of feel to the texture of my parts? There's a place for that, but there's also a place for I can get a whole team using an Ultimaker in like half an hour, and I can unbox, as I often do, a brand new printer at a show or visiting a customer, and in 7 minutes it's up and running. It's ready to go. And I'm saying this not as like a brag. I'm saying this as someone who has been in desktop 3D printing since its earliest days. Now this is desktop. I'm not old enough to be from the earliest days of industrial 3D printing. So I guess I was alive. But the it used to take days to really get these printers to seeing, any desktop 3D printer to seeing, and to have it so ready to go. What it does is it allows you to start thinking about 3D printing as a different component. It's not something you're scared about, and it's not even like your primary energy tool. And I think that over time, that's really kind of our goal. We want it to kind of set further and further into the background as just like, I need parts. I care about my parts. I'm making my designs. I'm going to get the fluency of making the parts and following the processes and suiting the right material to it. So I'm not going to waste all my time, maintaining and tuning and tweaking machines.
I like that way of looking at it.
That's part of it. But then the other part, one of my friends from New York that I really have long trusted in this, and he's actually been in industrial 3D printing from the very beginning, Arthur Young Spivey, who's taught and he's worked in various contexts in almost every platform. He always would tell people when they ask him, because they constantly ask him, and he'd just say, buy the printer where you know that you'll be able to get service and support in 5 years. He's like, forget everything else, just do that. and so I'd like to point to that, when you're buying into our ecosystem, I mean, we're here, we're solid. We really believe in getting our customers printing. Even our printers even have among the highest resale value out there. So if you don't like us, you're still fine. You could sell it, and somebody who absolutely loves them will grab them from you happily. And all those elements I was mentioning before, our push towards an ecosystem model, our push to really strengthening the software role in changing how you design and manage and fulfill parts. It's also a part of Ultimaker extending itself, its internal skill set, our knowledge, out there in the world. We really want people to have good experiences with 3D printing. And we want to, to get all the tools possible to make it more and more easy for teams to add this capability and to be very specific, like, adding units of fabrication. You can start with if you're a manufacturer, you start with a couple of experiments. You haven't invested in a crazy capital expense that you're going to be regretting for the end of time. You've bought what you need, and even as you're getting to know it, you might get a return on investment in a couple months, even. Depending on your parts.
And that's I have to say, that's one of the things I've always loved about 3D printing, is that you buy this machine, and certainly if it helps if you buy the right one, but pretty much any 3D printer you buy into, the value that machine offers to you is going to continue to grow over time, because there's new materials coming to the market all the time. You got new software, plugins for Cura, just all these things that are coming out that are opening up these new possibilities for your existing hardware that you already invested in. I think that's one of the coolest things about this. And I have to just share one quick anecdote, because it illustrates, I think, what you were talking about, the different kind of printers. I said at the beginning, we offer a lot of different kinds of solutions because there's a lot of different kinds of needs out there. We sell the Creality printers as an example. It's a very different kind of a target audience. But as an example, I got my older brother into 3D printing over this past year, and he's done some amazing cosplay stuff with his 3D printers. I got him started with an Ultimaker, and he's still doing great things with that, but he's added to his collection, and he decided to bring in a Creality, one of the big ones. And he's doing amazing things with it, but my brother's an engineer. He has probably replaced half the parts on this thing. He's rewritten the firmware himself and customized the auto leveling. I can't imagine the kind of hours he's put into it. Now, he loves it, and there's a lot of people out there that really love that. And if that's you, you can have a lot of fun with some of these printers. But if that's not you, if you just are looking at this as, I need a tool that's going to work reliably to get my parts, that's kind of where I think Ultimaker shines. So.
Yeah, and no offense to Creality, but that's so much the Creality culture of 3D.
Yeah,
3D
you're gonna have a lot of fun with it.
It's really great. I think it almost started. They can out of the box they print pretty well.
Exactly. I should be clear. He's replacing these parts to fine tune and optimize. Not that something broke. He just wants to tweak it.
so it was a pretty easy way to get into 3D printing. But then became a kind of dare to many engineers out there. How can I take this platform and just play with
push it a little further?
I love that. To be honest, that's where a lot of the strength for Ultimaker came from.
Sure, that's where the innovation happens. That's right.
When they were rolling out in 2011, 2012, they were the fastest FFF 3D printers out there, and some of the users were doing insane things with it. Some
still do.
But, yeah, and so that spirit kind of remains. Definitely in our staff. I've been interviewing a lot of staff members for our upcoming 10th year anniversary, and kind of doing a kind of oral history of the history of Ultimaker, and seeing that passion to explore and to push things further and see what's possible and share that is still alive and well. And so I kind of love that. I have friends that a lot of my friends in the 3D printing world, they have a room full of solutions, they're not satisfied just by having a printer that works. They want to try the next one, and work.
That's half the fun. Well, Matt, this has been a really fun conversation. I hope we've been able to share some of what we wanted to with those watching and listening about sort of what's involved when you're investing into an Ultimaker 3D printing solution, other than just this box that's going to show up on your doorstep. And so I thank you for helping us to get a better understanding of all that. It's been a lot of fun. I want to remind our audience, as always, head over to our blog at 3duniverse.org. You can always find 3D Universe Untethered in the upper left corner there. Just click on that to see all of our past episodes and our upcoming episodes. We've got some great content coming up. And a reminder to head over to talkingadditive.com to check out Matt's podcast series as well. Really cool stuff, especially this Tuesday episode coming up. I'm going to be checking that out myself as well, for sure. So thanks, everyone, for watching and listening. I hope you'll join us again next time. And Matt, thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks for having me on here. Really enjoyed it.
Me too. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.